Red Lobster is where America goes for seafood.
Seafood we just don't have at home.
Crab meat Louis, steak and some shrimp.
That's why we like to eat out.
Red Lobster. And the Neptune platter.
Got enough to eat there, big guy?
Will there be anything else?
Nope, everything's fine.
Red Lobster is where America goes for seafood.
If you love seafood, this is the place.
Red Lobster. Not the animal. Well, I guess you could eat the animal at this place. It's a restaurant chain that most of you are probably familiar with. It's one of the most successful and popular chains of restaurants that specializes in seafood, as you can imagine by the name. Most of their locations are in the good old United States of America. But they do locations in Canada, China, Ecuador, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, the Philippines, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, all over the place. As such, a lot of you have probably at least seen a Red Lobster, if not enjoyed a Red Lobster. Especially those biscuits. Those blasted biscuits. The Cheddar Bay biscuits, guys! Give me more of the biscuits now! Anyway, but in recent years, Red Lobster hasn't been doing so hot. They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protections just last spring. Why? What's going on? And are they on the way out? Well, let's talk about it, because the story isn't just about mismanagement. I mean, it is, but there's some sinister things going on behind the scenes involving a couple of their former parent companies. But before we get to that, let's talk about the first Red Lobster, which was opened on January 18th, 1968 in Lakeland, Florida. It was founded by Bill Darden and Charlie Woodsby. Some sources say the restaurant opened on March 27th of that year, not January, but this is incorrect, as that was the incorporation date of Red Lobster Inns of America. The restaurant started a few months before then. But the thing about Red Lobster is that it did well. Really well. The restaurant chain grew exceedingly fast because, frankly, they just served really good food. Seafood is of course popular, and they offered quality food at a reasonable price. People enjoyed going to Red Lobster, so they made a ton of money. Though eventually Darden hit a bit of a plateau. They were still making money, but not enough to expand the way he thought they should. So he sold the company to General Mills, of all people, who used to have a restaurant division. General Mills would inject a whole bunch of money into Red Lobster, and they began to expand rapidly into the 1980s, with locations popping up just all over the place. They entered Canada during that time as well. And in 1991, they introduced the biscuits, guys! Have you ever had them? They're delicious! General Mills had managed things pretty well, but by 1995, they decided to spin off their restaurant division to focus on what they were best at, which is, like, cereal. Thus initiated the founding of Darden Restaurants, the new parent company of Red Lobster, along with a few other chains like Olive Garden. Darden would handle the overall management of the company from then on, at least until the mid-2010s. Into the 2000s, things started to change for Red Lobster. They were still popular, people still liked them, but there was a lot of increased competition around, and they weren't necessarily everyone's first choice for dining, like they once had been. In 2009, they tried to re-image themselves with a prototype format that was modeled off of coastal New England architecture. But re-imaging can only get you so far. You still need people in the door. You still need customers eating your food, enjoying your food, and coming back with somewhat regularity. Darden couldn't figure out how to make Red Lobster profitable again. They were on a downslope, and they weren't really sure what to do about it. And by comparison, Red Lobster's sister chain Olive Garden was doing astonishingly well. Darden also made another mistake in their attempt to create a brand new digital platform. They had invested a lot of money into it, but it was behind schedule, and investors started putting pressure on Darden to do something. So on December 19th, 2013, they announced plans to sell or at least spin off the Red Lobster brand. And on May 16th, 2014, they announced their intention to sell it to a group called Golden Gate Capital, an American private equity firm, for $2.1 billion. The sale was completed on July 28, 2014, but things didn't get better for the company, they got worse. For one thing, their new management may not have been really interested in making them a successful restaurant chain. Golden Gate Capital was accused of asset stripping by selling off a lot of Red Lobster's real estate. Golden Gate kept the profits from those sales for themselves, rather than reinvest it into the Red Lobster chain and actually try to make them better. They just started taking the money. But they weren't even the real villains of the story, because eventually they would sell Red Lobster too. This time to a foreign company known as Thai Union Group. Now, Thai Union is an interesting story in and of themselves. As the name implies, they are Thailand-based, and they are a producer of seafood products. They were, in fact, one of Red Lobster's major suppliers of seafood for about 20 years. They did supply good quality seafood, but their history is plagued by some really, really shady stuff. They haven't been directly found guilty of anything technically, but they have been named multiple times in accusations and investigations that involve things like human trafficking, child labor, and slavery. Yeah. Again, they have not actually been found guilty of any of that, but they're sketchy at best. Regardless, the reason they're even involved is that, like I said, they were one of Red Lobster's chief suppliers, as well as an investor. They made a $575 million investment in the company in 2016, and then in 2020 they decided to buy out the remaining equity from Golden Gate Capital, making them effectively in charge of the company, and they wound up installing their own CEO. This caused the restaurant to kind of spiral out of control from a management perspective. Thai Union may have been good at fishing, but in terms of managing an actual restaurant, they didn't know what they were doing, and decided to inject some of their good old-fashioned abuses of humanity into Red Lobster. One of the biggest changes they made was staff management, involving the waiters. Prior to them, the general rule when it came to waiters in Red Lobster is that each waiter was in charge of 3 tables, which is a very reasonable number, and I can speak from experience on this subject because I have waited tables. I worked at a restaurant for several years, so I am quite familiar with this particular trade. And I will say that 3 tables is actually pretty nice. 4 tables was usually the reasonable max I would expect. A good waiter could probably handle 6 on an exceedingly busy day or if you were short-staffed, and possibly up to 8, but only with food runner support, and that's really pushing it. Well, Thai Union decided in order to cut costs, Red Lobster's waitstaff, instead of covering 3 tables, were now going to each be responsible for 10, which is absolutely insane. 10 tables for 1 person to cover? That's nearly impossible, assuming you care about your waitstaff's sanity, as well as actually taking care of your customers. I'm willing to bet plenty of people had bad experiences in Red Lobster, because they were probably thinking, well, where's my waiter? Your waiter wasn't being lazy or ignoring you, they were probably just responsible for way too much. 10 tables is just too much for a single person to handle. Like I said, I would be comfortable with 4, 6 if you really had to. 10 is outrageous. And this caused people to stop going to Red Lobster because they started having bad experiences with the service. And likely many of the waiters probably had to deal with getting the blame for this, when clearly it wasn't their fault. They also attempted a big old year-round promotion. See, one of the things Red Lobster liked to do was the all-you-can-eat shrimp special, which is exactly what it sounds like. You pay a flat fee and get all-you-can-eat shrimp. Normally, it was a seasonal thing, only available during the fall. But in 2023, they decided to make that a year-round thing, and this was a really bad idea. From Thai Union's perspective, it made sense because the shrimp fishing season had been exceedingly good. They had a huge surplus of shrimp, so they certainly had plenty of supply. But they didn't consider how many people were really going to take advantage of this. The profit margin for any kind of bottomless deal is slim, mostly because you never know how much someone is really going to eat. It eventually gets to a point where you're serving them at a loss, but you have to keep serving them because that's the deal. And it turns out people could eat a lot of shrimp, and they had expected a 20% increase in customer traffic, but wound up with a 40% increase. This caused them to lose millions of dollars over the year, and they were already deep in debt. Upper management started treating the company like a revolving door because, frankly, they just couldn't stand working under Thai Union. They actually did hire some people who genuinely knew how to run a restaurant, but Thai Union kept forcing things that they knew weren't going to work, and they weren't going to stick around for the fallout. A lot of them would leave the company in just 2 years. So poor service due to overworked staff, constant changes at corporate management, an astonishing amount of debt that they had no way of paying off, and a bottomless shrimp deal that wound up losing them money rather than making it, all came to a head just last spring. In March of 2024, Jonathan Tybus was hired on as the company's new CEO. Now the thing about Tybus is that he has a history of working in companies that are going through bankruptcy. He was CEO during the bankruptcy of Kona Grill and the chief restructuring officer of Crystal. He was the sort of person you hired when your company was doing poorly, as he'd already done a lot of work in restructuring companies that were failing and pulling them out. On May 13th, 2024, Red Lobster suddenly, but not completely unexpectedly, closed over 100 restaurants spanning 28 different states. And just the following day, they announced they were preparing to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protections before Memorial Day weekend. The bankruptcy proceedings revealed that the company was $1 billion in debt, which is just horrifying. And on May 23rd, 2024, they announced that their Canadian operations would also be declaring bankruptcy, and the other performing locations there would be shut down as well. So the real question is on people's minds is, are we saying goodbye to Red Lobster? Because the thing about them is that at their core, they are a good restaurant. They've made good food over the years, and there are people that genuinely like them, including, well, Flavor Flav. Yeah, the hip-hop rapper was actually hired by them to be their new spokesperson in commercials on June 12th. The reason for this is due to social media. See, as weird as a choice as it may seem, Flavor Flav loves him some Red Lobster. So much so that on a social media post, he showed off a picture of himself at an establishment ordering the entire menu in an effort to help them with their bankruptcy situation. And Flavor Flav is a hype man, so hey, whatever. At least they got a hold of somebody who genuinely loves the company. Over the last few months, they've announced plans to shut down some more locations that are underperforming as part of their bankruptcy arrangement. But at just the beginning of this very month, September 5th, 2024, a court approved Red Lobster's bankruptcy plan. Once they exit out of bankruptcy, RL Investor Holdings, which is a group consisting of TCW Private Credit, Blue Torch, and funds that are managed by Fortress Investment Group, will acquire them and continue to operate Red Lobster. So as it stands, as of the making of this video, it doesn't seem like Red Lobster is going anywhere. They are downsizing, and it is very likely that many of you might lose your local locations. But I don't think the brand is necessarily going to die. They are still very popular, and people still like them a lot. They are the kind of place that people like to go, and as long as they can start treating their waiting staff better, and manage themselves better than Thai Union did, which is actually a very low bar. It's not hard to do that based on what we've heard so far. I think they'll be able to turn it around, assuming they actually, try. But I definitely have some level of confidence in them. Mostly because of those biscuits, guys! Seriously, the biscuits, God, they're so good! And with that, a special thank you goes out to all my underwater train finders, Some Dude 267, Benjamin Owens, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, Jack Carson's Railroad Videos, Lord R 444, Isurfer 1405, Charles Kwiatkowski, Matt Weaver, Tom Red Lion, NS Productions 8104, Wheeljack 8401, Rescues Greyhounds, The Baxter, Caleb Crosswhite, Josh Johnson, Killer Brain Waters, Prez Drenton, Master of Dawn, Travis Dolinsky, JBL Explorers, Tommy Rossini, Ben Mikola, Panzer Kitsune 131-232, Mark Holding, Mr. Terevel, Hayden DeGrow, No, Kurt Forkham, Mr. Sleepy, Harry, Drew Debris, George Kenny, Kevin Wood, Liam Wright, Hendrick Motorsports Fan 5, Hannah Bird, Duraushi, A Person 723, William Nemo, Dr. Racer 78, Shimasu, Metal for Life Guy, Andrew Bowen, Crimson Rose, Ryan Wehofer, Jared Brussel, Zintac M, Boss K, Orange Glass, Andy, The Conceptualist, Acoletti, Ohio Trucker 1, Windy City Rails, John Videola, AET Museum, NJ 1969, Extra Special J, Jonathan Coco, and of course, my dad. Till next time, this is Darkness, individual of fun, farewell.